To the south of the tiny country of Rwanda lies its slightly bigger but similarly tiny neighbour, Burundi. This country is significantly more troubled than the former. It has a very agriculture-based economy and struggles to find its footing to truly modernise and build upon its stagnant economy. A big problem it faces is internal conflict. It has an extremely shaky past, and as recently as 2015 it barely beat an attempted coup. And this is potentially due to what are, quote, low government capacity, high corruption, high poverty, poor education, and poor infrastructure. Its current leader, Evariste Ndayishimiye, recently took power in June of 2020, replacing the long-standing president Pierre Nkurunziza, a man who was effectively a dictator, so perhaps the country has a fresh start, and a chance to institute more effective economic reforms. Burundi has a population growth rate of 2.5%, over double the global average. The combination of running out of farmland and the established precedent of two past genocides means that Burundi is going to see a catastrophic situation soon, if the economy isn't modernised and if it has too large a population in poverty. Burundi is regionally divided into many smaller provinces, with a capital province for the capital Gitega and a special urban province for the biggest city, Bujumbura. Along with the other 16 provinces, the country is divided further into 117 communes, and even further into 2,638 colines. The banks of the aforementioned city Bujumbura are adjacent to the large lake Tanganyika, which it shares with the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Tanzania and Zambia. Further north is the National Park of Ruzizi, a relatively small reserve also beside the lake, and elsewhere in the country are two other bigger national parks. Interestingly, if one lays a map of where not to travel in Burundi over a national park map, it seems that insurgents use this geography as natural defences to entrench themselves, making it harder for the National Defence Force of Burundi to clean out these insurrectionists. Burundi, generally like most of the rest of Inner East African region, is very mountainous, with the only flat bits being found a narrow strip of land facing the lake on the west of the country, which is the economic centre. It also has a surprisingly dense road network, connecting the country up fairly well for such a backwards and high altitude area. Some of the country is covered in thick jungle and some is drier, with slightly sparser vegetation. However, of course, all the country comes under a distinct tropical climate. The history of Burundi is very similar to Rwanda's, being mostly scattered Tutsi and Hutu tribes, when in about 1796 the Burundi realm first came about, in competition with the already established Rwandan kingdom. First becoming a German colony after 1884 and becoming a colony of Belgium after World War I, the land was organised into the division of Rwanda-Urundi, where the minority Tutsi population, 15%, ruled as a monarchy of the majority Hutu population, 85%, continuing into their independence into 1962. The Tutsi monarchy was very oppressive towards the Hutu population, refusing to accept their presence in office, which resulted in the overthrowing of the monarchy in 1966 by the Prime Minister Michael Maikombrero and the creation of the Burundi Republic. Much like in Rwanda, ethnic tensions flared until a breaking point on April 29, 1972, when in the south of the country roaming militias of Hutu went around slaughtering many Tutsis and committing various atrocities. The following retribution enacted by the mainly Tutsi-led government was extremely severe. A huge amount of Hutus were targeted, all seen as rebels, being brutally put down by the army. Between May and September, after a total amount of up to 300,000 Hutus killed, the government ceased the genocide before the international community really seemed to take notice. This genocide was extremely successful for the Tutsis, as no real repercussions ever seemed to be leveraged against them, and the amount of Hutu elite that were killed turned Burundi into an even more extreme Tutsi monopoly. This made the Tutsi population happy and kept the Hutu population in fear. A coup in 1976 led to even more power abuses, and another coup in 1987 flared up ethnic tensions again, with many tens of thousands of people ending up being killed. The situation was attempted to be restored in 1991, with the first Hutu president of Burundi, Melchior Ndadaye, being elected in 1993. This very immediately led to his assassination at the end of 1993, whereupon the Hutu populace rose against the Tutsi oppressors, backfiring immensely as the full weight of the Tutsi army came down on top of them, causing yet another all-out genocide with another 300,000 casualties. This subsequently sparked a huge civil war which raged on until 2005, a war fought between several different factions and rebel groups. After the re-establishment of quote, democratic elections, Pierre Nkurunziza came into power, holding a rather authoritarian office until his resignation in 2020. In 2015, however, as the president announced his third run for office, multiple opposition groups sprung up and mass protests filled the streets, eventually resulting in the army announcing a coup in July. This group was weak, however, and was quickly defeated in the forests of northern Burundi. Nevertheless, a plebiscite was called, asking whether to keep the current president or vote in the pretender, which Nkurunziza won with a healthy majority of 69.41%. For historical reasons and geographical difficulties, Burundi has an absolutely demolished shell of an economy which shows little signs of becoming anything powerful. This said, it has shown growth over the last few decades but has slowed down in recent years, even seeing a decline. Likely due to the devastation during 2015, the country went from its peak in terms of an average 8.07 billion GDP in 2014 to a 7.84 in 2015. This also impacted GDP per capita, likely as less jobs were available at the time. Thus Burundi went from a 4.5% GDP growth rate at the end of 2014 to a -4% in 2015, which by 2017 sat at a square 0% increase. This said, although Burundi may currently be on any kind of economic increase, it has gone from its lowest debt percentage of GDP at 36% in 2014 to 57% in 2017. It is clear that economic recovery may come at a huge cost in the future, possibly leading to rampant inflation as the government needs more loans. Being an extremely agricultural-based economy, with main exports being coffee, tea, sugar, cotton and etc., as well as being landlocked with no good routes to the outside world, Burundi in 2010 spent 3.25 times as much money on imports as it made from exports. Agriculture in 2008 also made up 32.9% of Burundi's GDP and employed a massive 70 to 90% of its manpower. It can be expected that ethnically most of these workers are Hutu, as Hutus are generally seen as the workers of the land by their Tutsi counterparts. The geopolitical situation of Burundi is more often a case of managing internal conflicts and overcoming the landscape's challenges to deliver administration and order to the whole country. Despite its size, it seems in the various jungles of Burundi there is still a plethora of places for insurgents to hide. This said, internationally, Burundi is pretty irrelevant, with its only real rival being the similarly sized Rwanda. But then again, Rwanda is far ahead of Burundi in terms of their economy and social reform. In the event of invasion, Burundi has such a large border with Tanzania that despite its natural highlands defense, it wouldn't last long due to being overwhelmed in the difference of manpower and equipment, being forced to resort to guerrilla tactics. In a war with Rwanda, however, it would likely have more of a chance, with both countries likely fighting mainly over both of their western regions, either trying to secure their border with the DRC or make a contingent line of defense from Lake Kivu to Tanganyika. The rest of the border may remain uncontested as various small lakes and rivers straddle the border, making conflict there much harder. Due to Burundi's capital, Gitega, being extremely buried in the middle of the country, surrounded by highlands and jungle, it may have a chance to resist invasion, especially if that invasion was from a similarly matching nation like Rwanda. Burundi may fit into the sprawling East African Federation for cultural and geographical reasons, however due to its limited economic and industrial capacity it may find itself in one of two situations. One is that it is neglected and ignored as a rural backwater, with insurgencies in the region intensifying until the Central East African government has to come in and suppress it, which would almost certainly be seen by the native Burundians as the foreign army moving in to oppress them, causing even more revolt and leaving the area absolutely devastated, likely spilling over into neighbouring regions. Another is that Burundi is heavily invested in, its economy is modernised, however the amount of funding put in would likely be seen as unfair to the other constituents of the Federation, causing instability elsewhere. This economic support would likely empower the already richer Tutsis into a significant middle class, propelling them way past turning Hutu and possibly flaring up racial tensions once again. Both scenarios have a negative impact on Burundi because I believe the country is in a position where it will naturally go through an immense amount of bloodshed before it sorts itself out. For this reason, it may be seen as a ballast to the future of the EAF, but perhaps it can bring stability if it establishes itself as a modernised and mechanised agricultural base, on account of its poor potential for resource extraction and the Union's immense population it will have to support in the future. Burundi may be on a path to recovery, but it is my belief that the country needs to take on an all-new path, one that can make it contend with its neighbours in a different way than it is currently doing. Antagonism of Rwanda is not helping it much. Rwanda is stronger. It's developing into Paul Kagame's dream of a Singapore of Africa, while Burundi degrades into conflict after conflict and regressive regimes. It needs to enact swift economic reform, and only then can it be a horn of plenty.